Welcome back, students, to the next video. We'll be covering JSON in Java, just the basics. We're going to get it set up and running and see how some of the basic data structures and first formatting goes into getting this up and running. If you're following the Java stream, you're probably using NetBeans or an IDE like it. And so I'm going to show you how to get a project set up to make sure that JSON is actually going to work inside of it. So I'm going to go New Project. I'm going to make a basic Ant project. You can make a Maven one and manage some of the manifest files if you like, but I'm going to make a basic Ant one just to show you the fundamentals with all the noise taken out. I'm just going to call this JSON intro and have it generate an intro file for me. And wonderful, I see the project getting built right here. I'm going to clean up the comments that get auto-generated just because I prefer it to be able to see a little bit more clean and clearly what we're working with here. And great, now I'm ready to go. So if you're in my class, I would have given you a file to use at this next step. If you are not in my class, here so you can find it. Head to Google, Google JSON jar. JSON is a library in Java for JSON. And we're going to head to the GitHub page. And if you scroll down a little ways, you'll find that it talks about the JSON jar downloads link. If you want to use Maven, you can use the dependency list here. But we're just going to head to the downloads page in the Maven repository and hit downloads and find the jar file. So this is what you need. Again, if you're in my class, I'll have given you this file. If you're not in my class, then you can find it there. And once we have the file, we're going to need to add it to our NetBeans. You could just add it directly to your library, but it's nice to have in our NetBeans in general because it's going to allow us to use it again in the future much more easily. So I'm going to head to Tools, Libraries, and click on New Library. I'm going to call the new library JSON and hit Enter. So I already have one built, but I'm just going to show you here how I make it. You should see an empty library class path here. And you're going to press Add Jar or Folder. Unfortunately, my computer is glitching out today, and this is lagging like crazy. But when you click it, you simply want to select that .jar file you downloaded. Just take that file, and it should end up looking like this, where you have that version. It might be a slightly different version than mine. Not a big deal if it is. We're just using the fundamentals. .jar file stored in a library called JSON. Then hit OK. And now you can right-click on your project that you're in's libraries and say Add Library. Find it from the list. Here's my JSON, and I'm going to press Add. And what we've done here is we've now imported the library of features that comes with the JSON repository so that we can actually use all the functionality nice and easily and get this new awesome strategy up and running as easily as possible. So perfect. Make sure you pause and rewind if you need to kind of catch any of those steps along the way. But I'm going to forge ahead into our next part of the tutorial just so that we can keep on layering some things on here. So the first thing that I want to show you is creating a basic JSON output. So we are going to instantiate a JSON object. I'm going to do it like this. Oops, JSON. Now you'll notice that I get these red errors because I haven't yet imported the JSON library in. You could manually type import and all the data, all the details, but I forget all the different subtleties of what to write exactly. The easiest way is to hover over and press Alt-Enter and just let the program auto-import the right reference. Perfect. So now it's imported the actual JSON library. It's getting it from this library folder right here on the side. And now we are able to work with it. So I could now type in JSON dot and see all sorts of features available to me to be able to work with this JSON stuff. But we're going to do that in a moment. With this JSON object now created, I need some information to be able to actually import into a JSON file. So I'm simply going to make a very basic string. I'm going to call this word and just say the word hello. And let's see what happens when I now take this string and with my JSON, I run the toJSON method. And in it, I pass this word string. So what I'm going to be doing here is actually converting it into JSON format. So our library is going to perform the operations for us to kind of convert all this information into the proper formatting. It's a very simple scenario, but let's see how this works. So the output, we're going to call it JSON output. So we're actually going to get a new string with the proper formatting for JSON format. So really, this is kind of the intermediary converting this format into JSON format by doing all the in-between functionality. Awesome. Okay, so just out of curiosity, let's see what the output would be if I just output this in my program here. So I can run this, and I see it just says hello here with some quotation marks around it. Okay, interesting. What happens if you write this to a file? I'm just going to copy and paste some file writing and import the proper things here, and my exception handling. We've covered this in the past. If you're really interested in learning more about this, then you can kind of pause and take a closer look. But for now, I'll assume you know how to do file writing. And we're now going to take this content, this JSON output, and try to write it to a file that I'm just going to call this output.json for now. And when I run this, it says successfully written object to file. Where do I find this file? Here's a reminder. In my project, I can right click and go to Properties, and at the top of the project folder, it shows me the source directory where my project is stored. So if I head to my File Explorer, I can just head to this application, and now I see a file should be created. Let me zoom in a little bit here. Output.json. This is the file that I defined and built here. You can see here, if I change the name of this to test and ran this again, I would have a separate file called test. Right? So I'm coordinating this. I'm in charge of where this is stored. I'm in charge of what this is called. I'm just going to delete the test for now and open up this output. And we'll see that it produced just a basic string hello, which is really, really boring and not at all the point of what we're trying to accomplish here. A single kind of variable output in JSON is not really what we're kind of aiming for and striving for here. So let's up the complexity a little bit. How about instead of just having a basic string, I instead have, up here, what if I make something a little bit more interesting? For example, I could make an array of strings. I'm going to call this words, and inside of it, I'm going to populate it with a number of words, like dog, cat, hello. Awesome. And what we're going to see in here is if I update my variable to be words, all the other content should be already linked here. My output is a string being built from the JSON library, converting this string array somehow into some kind of JSON format. Let's run and see what happens here. Okay, I have an array structure with the contents inside of it. And if I head back over to my output file and allow it to update and load, you can see that, oh cool, I now have JSON format array. Awesome. But if you were paying attention to my last video, I talked about how we don't use the array nearly so often as we do the object notation, which is correct. So we're going to get to that in 1 second. I have a quick sip of my coffee here to make sure my voice is nice and clear as possible for you. But before we get to seeing objects, I want to show you one more aspect of working with JSON files that I want to have you understand, which is the way that this is structured is technically a little bit kind of compressed on one line. The JSON that I showed you in the tutorial should have looked a lot more like things separated out and looking a little bit more easy to follow, human readable. And so how come it printed out like this? Well, this is just the basic formatter that we used. We haven't yet used the full feature that allows us to see things output in the best. We call it a prettified format. So to do that, I need to make a small adjustment to the way that I create my JSON object. I'm going to add a little bit of code here, new JSON. Instead, what I'm going to say is JSON Builder. This is a feature of the JSON library that allows us to, before we actually instantiate it, add on some customization features. Now, I have to import it like many other features, so Alt-Enter, import the JSON Builder here. Perfect. Now when I press dot, I can see there's a whole bunch of kind of filters and advanced customization features that allow us to make the JSON output be more different standards and different kind of strategic ways of visualizing it. And there's one that we really want to use as much as possible. I'll have it pop up here called Set Pretty Printing. This is what's going to allow the output format to be nice and elegant and much more human readable. And in this strategy, once we've kind of layered on the customization settings, we then say .create. So now my JSON object is a little bit more complicated. It has all the same fundamental functionality, but it gives us the advantage of also being able to layer on this setting customization on top of it. Now if I run my program, you'll see the output both in my console here, as well as if I reload my file, is automatically filtering it and outputting it in a nicer format. This is really nice because now our files are much easier to work with in a human readable way. And don't worry, in a future video when we read back the contents in, it will be able to fully read the contents back, no problem, whatever format we have. So we might as well use the nicer one, right? Just kind of makes sense. Awesome. So we've been able to take just some basic information that we input to our program and convert it into JSON format. Pretty cool. All right. Well, what about objects? We've been talking about that. And so I am going to build another class that I can use to create an object in this situation. So follow along and pause if you need to kind of keep up with this. But I'm going to create a student class that stores things like a private string for a name, a private int for age, a private string for a major. This is kind of a nice starting point. But I'm also going to create I'm going to make these a different strategy just for, I'll tell you in a minute or two why I'm building it this way. But I'm going to make a couple of them a little bit independent so we can see some examples a little bit later. And now my constructor, when I build this student, I want to require a few things. I want to require a name, I want to require an age, I want to require a major. So that when a student object is built, awkward typo, we need to be able to have this information flow in. And this dot name equals name. This dot age equals age. This dot major equals major. So we're going to assign these values. So we got this little error here. Student, I'm typoing a bunch of different things. That's all right. Errors happen. We fix them. That's part of coding. And so now I have this student class template kind of built with some basic information that allows me to instantiate a basic student state with some options for updating some more information to come. Okay, so what are we going to do with this here? Well, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to get rid of this string array of words that we built. And instead, we are going to instantiate a student. Perfect. Now to fill in the name, let's just go with my info here. Wonderful. So we're building a student based off of me. Awesome. So this student that we've made is a complex object. It's not like a simple variable anymore. It's something that has more complexity to it. It has different fields that have values to them. I have some optional fields that are technically could hold value, but right now they're holding null information, so we'll see what happens with those. And we could fill it with information later. For now, let's just have these three basic pieces of information in. And what I want you to see is that in the past, to actually store the information of a student, we would have to, like in our file writer, write one at a time student dot get name, get age, get our what do we call it? Our major. Get those individual strings and print them out manually and organize it. And there's a bunch of stuff that we have to do to kind of coordinate it. And then reading it back in is a lot of work. But the purpose of having JSON here is that now I can actually just take this student object as a complex thing. I know it's not that complex yet, but it's much more complex than any individual variable we built earlier in this video. And we have it convert that object into a string. Wait, how can it do this? How does it know this? Well, the simple answer is that other coders have solved this problem for us so that we don't have to kind of go through all that work ourselves. Another term I want you to know here is called serialization. Serialization is the process of converting a complex object like a student class here. It could be any other object that you make, converting it into a different format that can be encoded into things like byte data or into files. So basically it's a term that means someone else has programmed the capacity for objects to be turned into strings that can then be prettified into nice outputs that we can see. So if I save and run this, we can see in the console here, and I like to open up the actual file to see it like nice and clearly. Here I have my output JSON file, my name, age, and major. And just like we learned in the intro video, we have a key and its value connected. The key and its value, the key and its value. So all the information from that class that I filled in is now recorded persistently in a file really, really easily. I didn't have to do any fancy code to convert and customize how this output happened. The object exists, and the JSON process, tidy that up a little bit here, is actually doing the conversion for us. Awesome. Now, I also created the ability for it to have a course score list and a best friend. Let's start with course. I meant course. I can't spell today, apparently. All good. Scores. So what I might do is say, hey, student, I want you to have some new course scores. So I'm going to make a new double array for this and initialize it with some values. Let's just say my course scores were like some decent numbers, one really nice high class, and then one where we really struggled a little bit. All good. So scores. So we have a nice list of course scores that we're now updating this object with. So in just one line of code, I added a whole bunch of information and just updated the object with it. And now look, if I just run this, bam, go back to my file, reload it, bam, all these scores are automatically documented super easily in the JSON in a subarray. Notice the squared off brackets. It's an array here that contains the 4 entries in order. So all of the information in the proper ordering, in the proper place, with the proper reference, are all automatically stored and converted for us. Super great. One more thing that we'll do here is we're going to create a best friend for the student. Best friend equals, we're going to make a new student that will be their best friend. Let's call this student, I don't know, Lucy. Let's make them 35, and we'll say that their major was physics. Cool. So now we have a new student. This is an object that our previous student, Scott, has access to knowing about as their best friend. So we have an object within an object that was instantiated. What does JSON do with this? No problem. JSON can store objects as well. Notice that best friend as the key has the value with squigglies. All of this is the object's components that are contained. And so here's where this all comes together. The entire JSON file is an object in the first place because of the squigglies. But we can store objects within objects as many layers deep as we want to, as long as we can make sense of it and keep organized within our program. JavaScript object notation. It's meant to notate things in an object structure. So this here is one layer of object that contains another object inside of it without any issues. And so, wonderful. We've seen enough variety that I think we have a pretty thorough overview of things. And your challenge to practice this is to try to create your own custom class, populate it with your own variety of field variables, and then try to JSONify or turn into JSON and write to a file the output of that, and try to develop your intuition for exactly how the conversion is taking place. And in the next video, we're going to do the reverse. We're going to create content in a JSON file and then feed it back into our program to be able to see how the two-way street works.